everybody, my name is Mike Johnson. I write for PWInsider.com. Welcome to High Spots TV. We are going to have a very interesting conversation with someone who's had quite a journey in professional wrestling, starting out right here where we are right now in what used to be the heart of the AWA, Minneapolis, Minnesota, a journey that took him all the way to South Africa, took him to Australia, Japan, WCW, Madison Square Garden, and obviously Green Bay, Wisconsin. We're talking to the man who's known under many different guises and personas during his time in professional wrestling, Mr. Magnificent Kevin Kelly, Thor, before there was a Marvel Cinematic Universe, by the way, and of course the convict Nailz for his time in the WWF, Kevin Wackles. Hello, sir. Thank you for being here. I'm going to ask the obvious question that everybody wants to know, but not that question. The other question, where the hell have you been? It's been a long time since you've done anything in the pro wrestling bubble, pro wrestling world. Wrestling fans have not seen you in a public light. What have you been up to the last couple of decades of your life that led you to sitting down today? Where have you been? What have you been up to?
Well, when I got out of pro wrestling in 2000, I had a couple business ventures going on. I got into a pawn shop. I also got into real estate sales as far as commercial property, housing property, and then I got into selling trailers, cargo trailers, race car trailers, NASCAR type trailers, enclosed and open flat deck trailers. I've had quite a multiple a range of businesses. I've also got a lawn and snowplow company going, so I'm staying super busy 7 days a week.
So you're just spinning plates all over the place.
Yep.
All right, so we're going to jump into pro wrestling, but I have to ask you first of all, you may be the second person I know of who owned a pawn shop in professional wrestling. The other one being Todd Gordon, who ran the original ECW with Paul Heyman. He has the one in Philadelphia that's still been around. What's that like working in that world? Because I imagine it's probably a little bit like pro wrestling where there's all sorts of characters in and out all day.
Quite a few, but mainly I was more of an investor. I wasn't a hands-on employee as far as working the shop.
Okay.
I had an investment and I had other people working that business for me. So mainly I was just a behind-the-scenes investor.
An investor.
Yep.
Okay. All right, so let's talk professional wrestling. Obviously, everybody watching this knows your accolades. They know your resume. I want to take it back to Bloomfield, Minnesota, right? That's where you're originally from?
Bloomington,
Minnesota, excuse me. So that's not too far from here.
Correct.
Were you a professional wrestling fan growing up? Like, were you watching Crusher and Bruiser and Vern Gagne and guys like that when you were growing up? And what are your memories of your early memories of professional wrestling?
I did watch the AWA, back in the 60s and 70s, and I did watch all the guys that you mentioned. It wasn't that I really wanted to get into pro wrestling. I was working out at a gym in South Minneapolis, not too far from here, and one day Hulk Hogan came in the gym, and we became good friends, and he said, hey, you'd really be a good professional wrestler. You look like a wrestler, you're big, you're blonde. He said, if you ever think about getting into pro wrestling, I can help you get into it.
So he was the connection to Brad Rheingans.
Correct.
All right, we'll talk about Brad in a second. So obviously, you were working out in the gym. Anybody who saw you, especially in the Mr. Magnificent era, you were always a bigger guy, had a great physique. What was your sports background like before Hogan sort of was the bridge to get you into professional wrestling? Were you doing different sports or bodybuilding in before pro wrestling?
No, not bodybuilding. I did powerlifting, and I did some boxing, and also, obviously in high school, I played the high school sports as far as hockey and football, but I wasn't a standout superstar in high school. I was just an average guy going through high school. I didn't really blossom till later in high school, till my early 20s. And in my early 20s is when I met Hulk. And working out in the gym, Hulk and I were working out together, and one day a guy came in and put up a poster for the Minnesota Tough Man contest. And Hulk said, that'd be a great thing for you to get into. If you win the Tough Man contest, you can show all these fans out here that think that wrestling is fake and phony. You can show them that there is some legitimate badass guys in wrestling. So I entered the Tough Man contest and won the Minnesota State Heavyweight Tough Man contest. And Vern Gagne was going to promote that as me being the Tough Man winner against Brad Rheingans, the Olympic wrestler. And then I started training with Brad Rheingans to get into pro wrestling. Hulk set it up so I could work with Brad to kind of hone the craft of wrestling, and Brad taught me how to do different things, and basically ran me through a one-on-one camp for pro wrestling.
So I want to ask you about the Tough Man competition. For someone who might not have seen one of these things, what would it entail in terms of what you were doing?
It's 3 rounds of 2 minutes per round. You wear 16-ounce boxing gloves, you wear headgear, and it's basically a boxing match. And whoever wins obviously goes on to the next level. There's 3 different categories as far as middleweight, heavyweight, and super heavyweight, and I was in the super heavyweight category, and it was a 3-day tournament, and whoever wins that match moves on to the next level, and then at the end you fight for the championship if you've won your class.
Okay, so obviously you had a relationship with Hulk Hogan, so you had an idea of what professional wrestling pertained.
Correct.
How different was what you thought it would be versus the actuality of the physicality and the psychology when you started training with Brad? And what was that experience like? Because Brad's, like, to me, is one of the unsung heroes of wrestling. Great wrestler, great trainer, really highest in terms of the esteem and the type of person that he carries himself as, really high caliber person. And I don't think people today truly understand all that he gave to wrestling. So I was wondering, like, what was it like training with him on a one-on-one basis, and what was the experience like in terms of training versus what you thought it was going to be before you got in the ring?
Well, working with Brad Rheingans really opens your eyes up. If you think you're a badass guy and you're big and strong and you can lift a lot of weights, and currently at that time I was benching over 500 pounds, and all my lifts were really heavy, and I was in excellent shape. He being basically one of the best wrestlers for Olympic wrestlers that the University or that the Minnesota has ever put out. He went to the University of North Dakota. Brad was just unbelievable to work against. He could take you and put you on your back, and you couldn't move. And it didn't matter if you were my size at 300 pounds and benching 550 pounds, or you were a guy like another guy that came in to work the Olympic circuit, weighed 360, benched 660. Brad could take him and put him on his back, and we were like a turtle. You could not move. Once he got on top of you, you couldn't get him off you. You couldn't roll him over. He was a total another level of anyone that you've ever went against as far as physical strength. His capability and his coordination on the mat was far superior to anybody else that I've ever seen or that I've wrestled with. Brad was a total another level of a competitor in pro wrestling and in amateur wrestling, which he basically dominated.
I have to imagine being in that situation where he's on top of you and there's no way out. It has to humble you, but also drive you to work harder. What were the lessons that he kind of instilled in you, maybe as a person or as a professional wrestler, that you kind of held and kept within yourself over the course of your career and your life? Because what you went through is a very unique life experience that most people will never understand. You had to have gained something from that helped sort of govern you as you went through life afterwards.
Well, he taught you to basically never give up. If you're in a tough situation and working with him, you try to do your best to come out on top, to move him, and you can't move him, just do what you can. But he instilled into you that it's going to be a difficult road. It's going to be very tough. It's going to take a long time to hone your craft, but basically don't give up. Keep on striving until you can finish.
The earliest match that I can find a result for you on online, yourself and Steve Regal defeating Brad Rheingans and Tom Stone, an AWA event in Milwaukee. Would that be your actual first match?
My first match was with Sodbuster Kenny J.
Really?
In Minneapolis here.
He just passed away last year.
Correct. Yep.
What are your memories of that match? Like, what was the level of nervousness or energy or electricity going out there to perform for the first time in a pro wrestling setting?
Well, obviously you're nervous because it's your first time in the ring, and at that time we were at the St. Paul Civic Center, and those buildings at that time for AWA were selling out. I mean, you had Hulk Hogan and David Schultz in the main event. You had Jesse Ventura and Adrian Adonis against Greg Gagne and Jim Brunzell. I mean, the card was stacked from top to bottom, all main event guys.